Awesome. So hello and welcome to the Smart Talk series launch live stream. I'm not your normal host. My name is Julia Aguillon, and I am sitting in for Miss Jeannie Dietrich today. Unfortunately, Jeannie lost her voice, so she couldn't join us today. So in true PR style, we are pivoting. So we're here to talk with Latina PR expert Melissa Vela-Williamson because it's a big day for her. She just published her own book, aptly titled Smart Talk: Public Relations Essentials All Pros Should Know. And we want to know all about the book. So today, Melissa is our special guest. Welcome, Melissa.
Good morning. Hi, Julia. Thanks for jumping in at the last minute. It would not be public relations without a little drama and pivoting. So that's exactly why we're here. And it's really why I wrote the book.
I'm so excited today. We've been looking forward to this day for a long time. And so it's been a hectic day and week, but we love and we're so excited about it. So as you launch your book today, we want to share with the folks who are watching more about the book. So how can we implement smart talks into everyday communications programming? We're going to get through all of those details today. So without further ado, here's your host, myself, Julia Aguillon, and today's guest, Melissa Vela-Williamson. We're going to jump right into the questions that we have prepared. And just as a friendly reminder, if you have any other questions, drop them in the chat and we'll get to them in the last 15 minutes. So, Melissa, you texted me yesterday morning that you were very nervous about the book launch. How do you feel today?
I feel a lot better. I kept telling everyone that this book was kind of like having a baby. You know, it seems like, oh, it's such an exciting time and you're waiting forever for that special day to come. And then the day before you're like, what did I do? I'm not ready for this. How's this going to change my life? And to be honest, most of my big experiences in my life have been like that. But I think the big point of it is to move forward anyway, right? We're all really afraid of doing something new or different or that may cause some changes in our life, whether it's good or bad. And you know what happens. So I'm just so glad and thankful to be here. I'm really thankful to my husband for all his support and the kids for being involved and interested, and my family and particularly my team. You know, you all heard some of the backstories and those moments of where I just needed extra encouragement to say, keep going. Because this book was a calling really put on my heart, and following your calling is often not comfortable. Our recent season of Smart Talk series, the podcast, we went through what does it mean to be a trailblazer? Because I really felt like, gosh, it's really, really hard to do something that there's no path made for. Or if that is, no one showed you that way. So that's really the spirit of which I wrote this book, is a guide to say, this is what public relations really is. This is how it's evolving in the industry, and even like pushing it forward a little bit, and how we should be integrating into diversity, equity, inclusion, how we should be parts of what's socially responsible in our industries and society. But then also, like, how does it work, and pulling back the curtain, because there's not enough representation of all kinds of people in the industry. And I think a big part of that is that a lot of people don't know about PR when they're studying in school. There's not a lot of PR majors. And then as they go through school, they may not know anyone like them that's done this work. So without that kind of encouragement and invitation in, they may feel left out.
Yeah, I totally love that you touched on that, because I feel like you were kind of that guide for me. And so I've heard you describe the book in a way that it's a scalable way for you to do the thing for other people. And so I'm really excited just about the whole concept of the book and being able to bring other people into this field. So let's talk about your journey. I mean, you've been working on this for almost a year. It's felt so abstract for a really long time, and now it's finally here. It's launch day. You have a physical copy in your hand and behind you. So let's hear about that journey. Writing and publishing a book and editing everything in between is a pretty big undertaking. What made you decide to write a book?
So thanks for that. And another shout out to Jeannie Dietrich. She has definitely been a mentor and guide to me. And unfortunately, she couldn't be here, like you said, Julia, because she lost her voice. And that's kind of a big deal. So I think, where this came from, and some of the story that I told her as we prepared for it. And I'm really telling everyone, I'm being honest, that, it kind of feels mystical. Like it was in the really, really scary time of the pandemic. It was probably like May 2020. And I was at church. My kids had, I mean, I had a son who's in kindergarten who went on spring break and never got to go back. A daughter who was a fifth grader, like a big ceremonial year, same thing, never got to go back and kind of close out with her friends. And while I was scared to kind of be in a big audience with people, my kids really needed interpersonal interaction. And so when your kids ask you, can we go to church? You're like, you should probably go to church. So I'm like, okay, let's find a way. Right. I always want to figure out how we can do things. So let's wear a mask. And it was such a scary time. It's like this invisible virus that could kill us, and we didn't know how it would impact us individually. And I'm running MVW communications, and we have clients like Meals on Wheels who were pivoting and really like upside down of how do we retool everything. So I went to church, and the kids went into the kids' church. And then I was literally too scared to go into the main auditorium. So I said, I'll sit here in the lobby, be near the kids and live stream it. But I had some time where I could kind of reflect. And it was just a really desperate prayer, to be very honest, of gosh, how do I get through this? Give me the right words, give me the resiliency, and give me the mental strength, the emotional strength, the physical strength to avoid getting the virus so I can help everyone. But really, like, give me the right words. How do I be that guide? And my background, I found PR by really happenstance. My last semester of college, I went to St. Mary's University and had a great English communication arts degree, which blended like the rigor of English, right? Grammar and writing, but like the beauty of the creative writing process. And so I was a poet and all that in college. But I learned about it my last semester. So I remember what a struggle that was for me trying to actually work in the field after. And I don't know, all those things are kind of mixing together. And because of that background, sometimes when a muse would hit and I would hear words like, oh, that's a good line, or ooh, that could be something, like I'll write it down. Especially now that we do so much professional writing, and I write a column for the Public Relations Society of America. I'm writing. I try to grab the gems when I can. And some words are coming to me. So I'm sitting there in church, terrified, praying, and words are coming to me. I said, well, I'm going to write these down. Maybe it's a column, maybe it's a podcast. I don't know what this is. So I just take up the notes app and I'm texting it out. And I look down, Julia, and I'm like, this is a friggin' book outline. Like, what am I supposed to do with that? Like, I have time for that right now. Like, I have capacity for that right now. Like, a new idea, like, there was no room for anything new. Um, but it kept bothering me. And that's what a calling does, right? It's that kind of siren call, like, to just can't shake off, and kept coming up. I said, I can't do this, right? And as I looked into it, I'm like, there's no publisher really looking for, oh, I need to really fund a Latina, because there's not a lot of Latino authors. About, depending on what stats you're looking at, 4 to 7% of authors are Latino in general. And then when you niche it down into about public relations, like that's going to be even smaller. So I said, well, if I did something like this, I'd have to do it myself. And, how would I do that? And a bunch of question marks. But then I went to a Hispanic Journalist Gala. San Antonio has a great San Antonio Association of Hispanic Journalists Association. And that trade association is a bit a part of that since I was probably 24 years old. Journalists are like the PR person's number one ally. They should be. And, when I was at the gala, Shea Serrano was talking. He's an author who's Latino. And he was talking about, like 4% of Latinos, and that was a stat he used, are authors. And it was really something that fired him up. And let me tell you, I was like, you know what? Like, why not? Why not me? Like, if I'm a, gifted writer, if people say they like my writing, if people say they like my ideas, uh, why not now? Because you know what? I really got bold during the pandemic, and I was like, I'm going to find every silver lining. I'm going to weave them into a blanket. Dang it. We're going to get through this, because at least it was something I could control. And so this abstract idea, like, it was so weird because most of the outline is pretty much the same in the book today, at least for sure, the heart of it. And I'll tell you that working with Scribe Media, who's my publisher, I went through their guided author program, and they were like my several different types of coaches all along the way. So I grew a lot, but it was certainly something that when everything was so crazy, at least I knew, okay, if I do my part, maybe this book's going to come to life. And so in less than a year, like here we are. And now I know the real work begins like a baby, but I'm down for it. So
I totally second everything that you've been touching on. It has been a lot of work just being part of your internal team too, trying to manage all of the file shares and also pre-planning the launch of this book. And so it's been a lot, but now that we're here at this point, it feels really exciting, and I'm so happy for you. So let's talk more about the book itself. Who's the book for? What audience do you want to reach? Um who should pick it up?
yeah, yeah. Well, I think anyone who wants to know anything about public relations today and where it's going tomorrow could benefit from the book. So when we were writing the book, we really centered down on like who are the avatars, right? So who were the key audience members? And for me, one, it was students like me, students particularly of color who may go to different colleges, university, maybe first generation graduates who need a little more encouragement and kind of that personal invitation. I have a theory in the book and I call it the invitation theory. And it's literally like if people from diverse or adverse backgrounds like tend to want that introduction by someone they know and trust into something new, right?
Mhm.
So I knew that the book, it would be really important for students, particularly aspiring pros of color, who maybe had not heard about PR, or maybe they're even studying it, but just don't understand really how it works because there's a big gap between what you read about in a textbook or hear from a class instructor versus what actually may be happening in the field, right? Also journalists transition into PR almost every day. And unfortunately, a lot of them learn once they're in, hey, this is not just media relations, right? The first chapter of the book is like, what really is PR? And, spoiler alert, like it's a lot more than just working with media. That's a very sexy part. It can be very dramatic. There's a lot of sales involved there that I get into, but at the heart of it, it's, 13 major disciplines and there's a lot to know and we play a lot of roles. And every day it gets more complicated. And so I'll say that that's really important for journalists to understand so that they can succeed. Kind of end the book with a story about how I ran into a journalist when I was finishing the editing process. And that person told me, like, man, I wish I had a book like this when I went into PR because I literally left because I felt like I was failing every day.
Wow.
And that really killed me, I don't want anyone to fail, especially if they're a person of color, right? We don't have as many generations in to some of these industries as our counterparts. I think PR is for everyone. I think everyone's background, their lived experience can be part of their expertise. So this is really helpful. And I think, those who do PR now, whether they're a full-time public relations pro or a marketing person who has to integrate it into their communication strategy and plan, like they need to know about where the field's going. So I have some models in there where I show how PR can naturally integrate with diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging, and that works very naturally together. And so I talk about cultural strategy and how to unite your audiences that are all very, very different by targeting their values. And so I think that's really important too, to have some new models in there. And that's Jeannie definitely helped me inspire that because I really loved her peso motto illustration. So I was like, yeah. So we have a PR plus DEI illustration where you're like, if you're a good person and do the right things in PR, and then if you're a good person, do the right things with DEI, like they'll intersect naturally and work together. And then
Mhm.
if you do those two things, it actually equals socially responsible behavior, which any pro at any level can do. So yeah, students who are studying PR, students who are not, oh my gosh, particularly English majors, right? You just know you love to read or write, but you don't know what to do with that except teach. Like, oh, we write a ton in PR. So many skills are transferable into the profession. So I just really want to get this book into as many hands as possible. And I'll be doing a lot of talks at colleges, particularly looking for Hispanic serving institutions or historically Black colleges and universities. So we can really diversify who practices PR.
I love that this is such a one of the main goals of the book. I know that representation that you were for me was really important to know. Like, hey, I could achieve X, Y, and Z as long as I do X, Y, and Z. And so I'm Really looking forward to seeing how this book impacts the evolution of the PR industry and hopefully diversifies it further. So let's talk about the title of the book, Smart Talk. What does smart talk mean? What is smart talk in your estimation? What is smart talk?
Yeah. So when I was coming up with the podcast series, I coined the phrase smart talk at some point. And I think I was trying to blend the idea of real talk, which is what we're doing, right? Something happened, we're making it work. And really just having that honest and intelligent conversation. So I didn't want to just have real talk, for example, where real talk can be pretty cutting and somebody doesn't have their PR hat on or point of view. They can be pretty tough with how they deliver information. But I coined the phrase smart talk because I wanted to talk about that. What is that candid but honest and productive, intelligent conversation like? I tend to like having more deep conversations. I don't like to be shallow about things or hide information or hoard information. And I've seen all of that in my career. And I've seen all that in my personal life too. So, I'm frustrated by that. I kind of grew up feeling like that I was always a little bit behind and I was trying to figure out how things worked. And then in my career, there's just been a through line of advocacy, right? And really wanting to use PR and communication for social good. Like, how do I connect? There's a need over here and there's resources here. Like, how do I get rid of all the red tape in the middle and like put them together? And so I think that's what Smart Talk is. And when we were going through the book process, the original name for the book was going to be something like the Public Relations Primer. But when I met with the book title coach, there's literally a book title coach. Um, she and I when we were talking, she's like, when I Googled you, I ran into your podcast, Smart Talk series. I think that's such a cool concept. And I was like, that is a cool concept. Like, think about that. And that's really what that is it's an extension. The book is an extension of, have like some of the best nuggets from columns I've written for PRSA, for the podcast and whatnot. And I put them all together in the book. And so it is definitely like it's smart talk. Like this is honest. There's every chapter opens with a story, something funny, usually, because there's a lot of cringeworthy moments in PR. And, if you're not prepared for it, forget it. You won't do well. Just like putting together this webinar. Like, I'm sure, like Julia, you're part of my ongoing team and Jennifer here in the background. And there's a lot of times where I'm like, hey, where are the logistics? Where's this at? Where's this at? Because I know anything can happen, right? I've seen so much. And so there's a lot of good examples to make all my points in the book here. And so I believe that's what smart talk is.
That's such a great overview of the definition. I think it really clarifies for those who are coming in with a fresh set of eyes. I like to call Melissa my straight shooter. She'll give it to you straight, no fluff. And so I really appreciate that. There's folks who I think learn better in that sense. So let's talk more about why aspiring pros should read this book. So you build this book as something that aspiring pros, new pros should read. Can you tell us why?
Yeah, I think the why behind it is because when I was learning about public relations, like I said, when I was studying as an undergrad, I go to the career services and I took every elective career services had, and I was like, what do I do with this creative background? What do I do with my, passion for photography? What do I do with all this stuff that probably won't make a stable career? And the closest I got to figuring something out was learning about copywriting, which, I do a lot of copywriting and in this work, right? My writing's been on sandcastles and billboards and t-shirts and whatnot. Again, no clue really what to do with that. And I think a lot of people like we hear, follow your passion. And it's like, well, sometimes our passions aren't really good monetarily, right? In a sustainable way. Maybe they're better hobbies. So for me, I feel like the book is a really good way to explain like what is PR, how can you DIY it if you want to do that, even if you're a small business owner, right? And you want to understand, well, how do I pitch media my story? How do I work with build relationships that's going to help me get leads for my business? Like all of that's in here. But I think that there's different parts that are really fresh in the industry, like really talking about making yourself a source to journalists, making yourself that real resource where you are trustworthy. Like I'm really, really tough in the book about thinking like a PR pro and acting like a PR pro. Because unfortunately, I've definitely seen where the pro themselves was the hot mess, right? They were the issue. and whether or not they were self-aware or they just didn't care. I don't know sometimes. But I've kind of leveraged my career where I just got out of those situations as much as I could. So I think a big part of it is not just the mechanics of how the field works, which is certainly important to understand. There's a lot of unsaid rules, right, that happen. Like in the chapter about making a good first impression, I think that's chapter 2. I get into like email strategy. I'm like, that sounds pretty boring, but let me tell you what, some of the most embarrassing things that happen, especially working with journalists, has to be email mistakes, right? So like not putting the right person's name, in the two line, or not knowing there was such a thing as blind carbon copy or BCC, and like putting everyone in the two line and then getting in trouble for that or embarrassed about that. I tell a very funny story about how one of the first times we were pitching journalists, right? What's our sales pitch or our story idea pitch? A good way to get some kind of reaction or feedback on it is to pick up the phone. There's a whole part where I'm like, pick up your phone. And I see that more and more with some of the younger generations. But let me tell you what, that's trickling over across, right? If anyone can get away with texting versus calling these days, it seems to be what's happening. But there's something really different when people can talk. And when I can, so I tell the story about the first time I did follow-ups on the phone with a reporter. I call at assignments news desk at a TV station. And the assignments director is like really grumpy. He's like, hello. I'm like, hello. And I probably went up too often. Like, you're right. I was like 23 years old. And he's like, what? Can I help you? And I'm like, yeah, just following up on that email I sent. Are you all going to be able to send a camera out to our press event? Can't even remember what it was. And he's like, I didn't get your information. So I'm like, oh, da. Tell him the date and time. He's like, I see that. He's like, don't you know you're not supposed to put everyone in the two line? And I was like, no, no. I didn't know that. I literally didn't know that. And I was like, no, but thank you. I won't do it again. Right. And I've never done it again. And I make sure that every person I work with knows the difference between the fields. And then we're very careful. So I'm like very tough about, look, this is what they're meant for. Here's how to use them. Because even now in school, like we're using Gmail a lot more, and you have to like specially open it up to use that. So you have to be very cognizant. And so I talk a lot about too in the book about being intentional and thoughtful. And so I swear, I bet I'll get comments like, oh, this felt like a self-help book in some ways. I'm like, yes, it is. Help yourself, because you can't help others if you're not doing things right.
Mhm.
And I think we just make so many mistakes in our career. And I just want to help people leapfrog past the ones at least I learned are no-nos.
Leapfrogging is such a good term. I definitely feel that this book is a way for folks who don't know some of those unspoken rules to kind of learn from others' experiences.
Yeah,
And so
absolutely.
I really appreciate you putting yourself in that vulnerable position to even share those oopsies moments. So I do also think that the book is more for um, it's for more than just aspiring pros, right? And so one of the notes that Jeannie gave us was that she feels like every executive should read that first chapter titled What PR Really Is. Why do you think every executive on earth should read about what PR really is?
Well, because I would say, and I love that she pointed that out, is because especially if you're an executive, like organizations, a brand is sustained by the people who are behind it, right? So you can have a great brand like Nike or Coca-Cola, or even, a small firm like MVW Communications. Like if we're horrible human beings, the brand collapses and dies with our behaviors, right? So if you don't understand the role you play as an individual, particularly as a leader, like then you become the PR problem. And I've seen that time and time again where you've got this really hardworking communication team, but the CEO just goes rogue on Twitter or does what they want. And when you can't manage your impulses and understand the whole spectrum of what public relation is, not only from trying, people think publicity, right? That's a piece of it. And journalists are humans and they've got all the tech and can Google all of us just as easily as anyone else, even better. That they don't understand the roles that they play. And then if you don't understand the integrated experience that a PR person, has to live through these days of understanding the strategy and approach that should be taken to show integrity and consistency and authenticity and respect for different types of people. Like there's a lot of responsibility and there's high stakes in PR. So right in that first chapter, I really want to explain like this is a lot more than media relations, like things that you earn versus that you buy, right? Because a lot of times I hear put out a press release, put out a press release. We're like, that's not newsworthy. Or sometimes I have to tell a client, like, you got to fix what's under the hood before you want to go and talk about it. We saw a lot of that happening during Black Lives Matter, and really being that strategic counselor and saying, does it really look like you have something authentic to say in that space? Are you one that gives, philanthropically to the effort, or do you have partnerships in alignment? What's your workforce look like, right? What would your employees say about you? Sometimes it's personal, right? And people's personal lives come out in the paper all the time. So that's a big part of it. But I really talk about like, in page 12, like I say, public relations is not about making, and here's the booksy, it's not about making a quick sale today. It's about building relationships with your customers for the long haul so that through good and bad, they'll look to your organization for products or services to volunteer with or to donate money to. And what is earned usually cannot be paid for. And there is nothing that money can do to fix a real hardcore PR problem, right? Especially if the person won't acknowledge it and make good for it. And we just have to remember, organizations are alive with people, and people are fallible. And so I want to give here's the guide and here's the light for anyone who's going to take the responsibility of being an organization's little Jiminy Cricket. Like, this is my little spirit animal, right? He's the one telling Pinocchio, like, don't do this. You should think twice. And that's what I feel like we are. Like we're not always appreciated because Jiminy Cricket, like sometimes Pinocchio's like, "Ruh, ruh," right? I want to do what I want. But there's consequences for that. And, so you want to just be pushing towards the good.
I really love the Jiminy Cricket analogy, so I love that you brought that up on your own. I think it's so true about the role that we have as PR folks for organizations, and so feel free to purchase a copy for your president, CEO, founder, and let them know what is PR. It's more than just media relations. So next, I kind of want to switch gears a little bit and talk about one of your differentiators is that you have a big area of expertise in DEI. I know you've been studying it since you were in grad school. You recently got certified. You have your CDP certification. And so, in my opinion, you have this really different kind of perspective on the DEI section. And so, tell us what you think PR pros are missing in their DE&I programs and what they need to do about it in 2023 and beyond.
Yeah. Big question. I mean, well, always start from inside, right? That's what I will say is diversity, equity, inclusion. And then you'll see a lot adding the belonging to, like, they are very principled steps towards respecting people, treating them well. And, when we started, I worked in diversity and inclusion in that department solely. And so I saw all the way around that and how they approach that inside of a corporation. And so I talk about some of those experience in here. But then when I got certified, there was more global understanding as well. I think the biggest thing for PR pros to know is like, what is it? So I kind of explained that, right? And actually in each chapter, at the end of each chapter, I go over like, here are the key terms that I literally bold because I love that in textbooks, right? When they bold it, I'm like, oh, that's a definition. So I expect people to highlight. So I define key terms and then I list the takeaways, right? So, because I know we're all busy. So at the end of the chapter, you're like, okay, what was all that? That was a lot of words. Here are the main takeaways. Here are the key terms. And then I have a pass the mic section. And that's part of my expression of making sure all kinds of pros belong, right? So at each chapter, there's 10. There's a different pro. And, I would say like 95% of them like are people of color, pros of color, because people of color and the PR industry in total make up only about 24%. And then pros that report to be Latino or Hispanic are only 10%. And see, living through that experience myself, I'm like, there's no real discrimination I ever felt but I did have my own different lived experiences as a pro. So as a Hispanic, right? And visually you can kind of see, okay, maybe she's Hispanic or Latino or Latina. Pro, there was some expectations on me that I felt like some counterparts may not have, right? Like, you know Spanish, right? Was often asked, not do you know Spanish? There's a big difference in that. And so sometimes just being aware of, is the language we're using inclusive? Are we being thoughtful and careful about that? So I have a chapter in the book called Tailoring for Multicultural Audiences. And it's really the chapter where I break into, here's how people are driven. They're driven by their values. I talk about value graphics by David Allison, who is a former marketer and a wonderful researcher. He was just on the podcast. And I love what he's doing, where he's saying we can't grade people or like judge them by demographics anymore, because that's the way we used to live back in the day. Like, certainly we're breaking all kinds of stereotypes, even being on this webinar today, right? As women, as people of color, whatever. We don't all act like the traditional roles that were put out for us a long time ago. Age doesn't change how we do some things and live now. And so I love his idea of, like, you figure out what people value, then you connect with them. And I love that concept as a PR pro, because I'm like, DEI doesn't have to be that difficult. And so I really kind of walk through that. I'm like, look, this is how you just champion that as a PR pro, and you kind of organically bake it into your actions. And that will have that multiplier effect in your organization. And that will be felt by your stakeholders or your audiences. And people will be happier, right, with you all. So it's being intentional. It's the small things like saying, hello, everyone, versus hi, guys, because maybe not everyone in the room's a guy, right? There's things like considering educational diversity. If you speak with me or read my columns or read the book, like, I try to break it down. Like, I don't want to talk academia. I don't want to use weird words people don't understand or acronyms they don't get. I even understand smart talk, like, what is that? But I kind of like the question mark behind it, right? And having that conversation and saying, we need to be real. So that's kind of where I'm coming from there, is I really break it down and saying, here's how you can make this work. And you can use PR to empower people, because you're giving people opportunities to tell their stories. A lot of them are unsung heroes. So if you look and you're conscious, like, who's missing from this conversation? That's like, even, the experience we're having now, Julia, like, you jumped right in, right? But there's a lot of times I'm like, you can do it. Like, just do it. Just try. It's uncomfortable. It's scary as heck. Like, every minute I'm going, we're still live. But you know what? Anyway, because it inspires other people. I know that that's what we should do. And the book is really also a huge amount of encouragement, telling, particularly when I talk about culture, and I break down what individualistic culture's like. And for some, and typically, if you were to research it, you're going to find that's more Western philosophy. That's more like that American kind of pull yourself up by your bootstraps. Some people may feel that that's a great way to live. Some people may feel like there's some fallacies in that. I'm like, tell me about it. Let me see what I can learn from that. Right. And I'll take what I want and I leave the rest. And then same thing from collectivist culture. Like, a lot of people of color, people from the Latino community, Black community, Asian community, tend to live and are brought up in a collectivist culture where we think of that group first before ourselves. And sometimes, I mean, that makes for wonderful interpersonal connections and a lot of respect and love in a family. But if you don't come from a healthy family, that can be a real obstacle in your journey. Or if you're the first one in your family to do something new, go to college, go out of state, get a different type of job, like, sometimes your family wanting to keep you safe, will kind of hold you back too. So you have to be willing to go, let me understand both of these cultures, especially professionally, because I see pros, like, they'll make it to, PR specialist, and then they won't go for director. They won't go for VP. They won't try to move into marketing or some other area because they have a fear. And I think part of it is just saying in the book, like, there's a lot of ways you can do things, and there's a lot of ways you can work in this field. And once you're there, like, move up, keep going, because that opens the doors, and you're not only like, oh, give me a seat at the table. Like, you're like, I'm going to make my own table. I'm going to invite others to it.
I really love that you touched on this DEI point, because I feel like even if you're a really seasoned pro, you can learn and extend upon your knowledge in the DEI space by reading this book as well. And I also agree with your point about sometimes just needing a person to give you that push of, hey, you can do this thing. Melissa's definitely been that person. I told you guys she's a straight shooter. And so I trust when she says, hey, I know you can do this, that I can really get it done. And so let's talk more about PR. What do people misunderstand about PR? And how do you think the book of Smart Talk will set them straight about these misconceptions?
Oh gosh. Well, I mean, I think that what they misunderstand is I think there's a feeling like it's easy, like it's not that hard. They're like, oh yeah, I can do a press release, blah, blah. It's like it's not that you figured out the format, you went on Google and you found an example and you wrote something. It's about is what's in that press release newsworthy? Do you understand the criteria for that? So that was such an aha moment for me when I just innately I kind of understood like this sounds like a good story. This doesn't. Sometimes you're working, you don't have the right words for something just yet. And I was teaching at a college one semester, and it was about mass media. And the textbook had a chapter about journalism, and they talked about journalistic culture and what journalists were taught. And they had a section about newsworthy type of criteria. And I'm like, oh my gosh, that's it. And the academics who wrote it talked about 8 points of criteria, and I've added a ninth. And really they're simple concepts, but I think most about PR, most things about PR is about like that foundational, simple, tried and true approach. Like when there's a lot of chaos, like a good PR pro would be very grounded and be like, these are the things that work. And there's new shiny bells and noises and approaches every day, but you want to take the good and leave the bad, right? So with the criteria example, like, yeah, anyone can write, like, here's a press release, I wrote it, but it's, if you're not hitting on, there's something special because it's a huge consequence to the community, right? Good or bad. You're not hitting on that this is new and novel or that someone influential took part in it. Some of those criteria that journalists are looking for, like, it's not newsworthy. And actually, it can really damage your reputation or reputation of others if you aren't cognizant of those kind of things. So, that's what's really different. And then I have a whole chapter about integrated marketing communication, which is Jeannie's featured in that. And we talk about the PESO model. And then I go through like my simplified approach because hers has so many wonderful tactics in it and so many different, like I've seen, especially like small businesses or nonprofits go, whoa, that's a lot to do. Even as a pro, I'm like, oh, if I could do everything on that list, right? But mine is like, okay, here's a wheel. There's a communication wheel. And if you're in the center of it, like here's your campaign and your plan, like here are the fundamental spokes on your communication wheel that would pretty much turn you towards success. And, I think it's the idea of like, we just need to continue to evolve the understanding of the profession, but then also push it forward too. So that's a lot of what's in there too. Is like, I know many pros who are already in practice. I mean, probably at this stage of my career, most of my colleagues are right at least middle of their career, mid-level. And I don't want them to think like, oh, there's nothing for me in here because I'm like, sometimes just getting that affirming word, you're like, yeah, you're right. Oh, I forgot. That's how you do it. I even have a section on there like when not to host a press conference because there's too many of those. And that's a lot of pressure on a pro to do. So I feel like there's a lot of good things that I wish somebody had written down and put somewhere I could have find versus like just figured out the hard way or through those really uncomfortable experiences. So let's pause for a second, Julia, and check in with all our little bells and whistles. Producer Jennifer, are there any questions for us or any, hey, fix your mic or anything we need to worry about?
Sophie May actually does have a question here on Zoom, and I think it's a great question because she's asking, how did it feel when you first held the book in your hands? Because she says, I know it was a long road. And that really ties into it because it's all this stuff that you've mentioned that was in your head and it wouldn't leave you alone. And so you had to do it. But then all of a sudden you do the thing for a year and now all of a sudden it's in your hands. So what was that experience like?
Well, I feel like I was in shock. I'm still in shock. This is not real. And I guess because I have had the fortune of having my own children, that it's kind of the same way. You're like, you're waiting for something and then it comes and you're like, what do I do with this? Like, and so I feel like I think I'm still experiencing that. I'm still walking through that surrealness. But to be very honest, the first books I got were my author copies. And I should have been like jumping up and down. Um, but I think, and I'd heard this too, like I know one of the questions Jeannie had sent forward is like, what are some of the like, some, good things about this process and like some bad things? And it can be like you had used the word abstract, Julie, like it could be very lonely. Like working on this book was a lonely experience. Like there was only I could write the content. I had a ton of editing help and advising from the publisher, absolutely. But it was on me. It was on me to meet those deadlines. There was plenty of weekends where, oh, sorry, husband, I either pushed him out of the house or then I got smart and rented a co-working space that was kind of empty on the weekends. I could go and work there. So, I feel like there was a lot of emotions around it. And then when I got it, I'm like, wow. But I also knew, and I'll share something very vulnerable and honest with you all. The first 100 copies are special. And they're special because there's a typo in it. And I say that because I'm going to use that mess, like Oprah says, to be my message. And I could have lied, I could have been like, oh, and like, it's fine. No one's probably going to run into it. Maybe no one even reads it all the way through. But goodness, like if someone used that stat, and then, cited me, like I feel so bad about it. And that's not the point. The point of the book is to work with integrity and to be helpful and to be a source. So the first 100 copies, like I'm literally going to use as part of my speaking tour with students and have them actually open it up and go, hey, you see that stat on page whatever? That's wrong. Scratch it out, fix it for your notes, and just know you're going to make mistakes. The only way you fail is if you just completely never get off the floor after you fall. So the first books I got were bittersweet. But after these 100 and everything you buy on Amazon, it's all corrected, y'all. I drove Sophie. I love you, Sophie. And everyone at Scribe Crazy. I was like, oh my gosh. But you're going to have those moments in your career. You're going to figure them out like me on a Friday night when you can't do much about it except like feel bad all weekend. You got to push through it anyway. And, especially in PR, like I embrace a lot of the Stoic philosophies. Like the crazier things got the last few years, the more I was like, ground me and center me. And I like to think that's what people appreciate about me and will appreciate about the advice in here. And that if I'm honest and say, hey, me too, like I make mistakes, not perfect. The book shows you and tells you a million stories where I wasn't, or someone wasn't with me. But then also even making the book was an example of that. Like control what you can, fix something when you find out you have a mistake, own up to it, and then use it to inspire others to keep trying. Because if I came out here and tried to act all perfect and I got it all together, look at us, big deal. Like that, how does that really inspire? Right? How does that really inspire people to try and figure it out? So that's how I felt, Sophie, was a little mixed emotions, but I think most things big in our life come with different feelings like that.
I appreciate you sharing that sort of behind the scenes because it's really real. And I think people can resonate with that and they feel that authenticity when you are vulnerable in that way. So the last few questions that I have for you kind of help kind of wind us down and close out. So let's start with this wonderful question that Jeannie prepared for us. At the beginning of your book, you relay a story about how your 8th grade teacher saw your gift in curiosity and creativity and set you on a path to explore those talents. If you could give some advice to your 14-year-old self getting started on this path, what would it be?
So the question was, and Jeannie read the story where I was talking about how, and that's another point of the book too, Julia, is that we don't all have that moment. We don't all have supportive families. I did, luckily. But they didn't always know where to guide me, what to do, right? And even with my own kids, I'm like, okay, you're kind of good at this or that. Where should we point you, right? That discovery phase as a young person is so important. And I think it's still really important as every day of your life. And the question she asked was about how in the book, one of the stories I tell was that how I got into PR. And part of that journey was, thank goodness, I had a teacher, 8th grade going into 9th grade year. To be honest, And love you, Miss Dash. You know, I don't know where she is, but if anyone knows where Mrs. Dash is, like, tell her I appreciate her, because she was the teacher who intervened and saw me in 8th grade where I was really not doing my best. Like, I think I was just bored and I wasn't being challenged. I hadn't been discovered as gifted and talented. And there was a lot of bad behavior in my middle school, so I couldn't concentrate. All that to say is I wasn't doing really great. And she saw something in me and never told me, like, hey, you have a gift, you're special, you're a good writer. Wish she had. So I would say, anyone on here, if you see something in a young person or someone that works, like, tell them, please. But she did promote me into honors English for 9th grade. And I remember a student, like, when it came out, I don't know why it came out, but one of the students who had a very good grade in the class was like, "What did she get that?" And she said, "She's a creative writer." And I was like, wow, like, that identity, I think I took that on.
Mhm.
And then I started exploring creative writing classes and poetry and all that. And that led to everything that we're here today to do. So the labels we give people can really encourage them and empower them, and it can also pull them down. And so I would say for that 14-year-old self, I just wish I had known what public relations was, that it was in even a career or a job, it was a thing when I was in high school. You know, there's so many high schools now that have these magnet programs and they have these specialized tracks. But even like those who maybe have communication, they're not often talking about PR. And PR is such a blend of all the talents. Plus, it really can add purpose to one's life, especially like the younger pros of today. Like, everyone wants to feel like they matter. Everyone wants to feel like they belong. And I think PR is a great club that anyone can join and invite others into. So the wrongs you see in the world, the things that make you mad, fire you up, like, you can use PR to make those things better. Like, whatever you're passionate about, like, you love swimming, you're into dance. Gosh, one of our apprentices, like, she, shout out to Alexandra if you're with us, but Alexandra was studying and she loved dance and she was a great dancer and she was studying PR and she became our apprentice, you know, from across the nation and ended up getting a job at the Charlotte Ballet. I just wish as a younger person, I would have known that. So I didn't spend so much time just wandering, right? Because if I had interned earlier, if I had shadowed earlier, if I'd had a mentor earlier, like, I don't know where I could be today. So that's what I'm hoping to do with the book. And I'm hoping that everyone who's encouraged by the book or by the message will just, you know, bring a young person in or encourage a mid-level pro to, like, go to the next level. Try, go. And I think that's an encouragement I want to give my former younger self.
I think that's such great advice. And the next question actually touches on what advice you would give to young pros, new pros who are entering the field as a whole. And so, what's one piece of advice that you'd like to leave them with?
Yeah. I think, you know, one piece of advice that I would love to leave with everyone is just go for it. Like, why not you? Why not now? Learn, you know, earn your stripes, as they say, like, learn as much as you can, contribute to the field, contribute to your art, whatever it is that inspires you. Do the work and then claim your credit. Go get it, right? And if you want there to be a change, it's like Gandhi says, like, be the change you want to see. So I think that was part of the calling too, is like, if not me, like, who will? Like, I am a published writer. I can do this. So I felt like I had a responsibility to do it. So I'd love to see more people just be fired up about claiming their responsibility and being good supportive advocates and allies for each other, which really, when you break it down, it's like, how do you be a good friend? Right. So that's the kind of DEI advice that's in this book too, is like, not these big polarizing concepts. It's like, let's be bridge builders. Let's bring people together. Let's unite on what we share and understand and appreciate differences. And here's how you take care of and have that PR point of view, which is people first, right? Very heart-led for a lot of us. When you're doing marketing, when you're doing advertising, when you're handling social media, like, you're thinking about that long game and the long-term interests of yourself and your organization and your stakeholders versus just what's in it for me. Let's make that sell. And, you know, so that's a lot of what I'm thinking about is like, go for it, do it with intention, get up when you fall, keep trying, like, do it anyway.
I think to add to that, one thing Melissa always tells me is that we use our PR for good, and it's almost like PR is our superpower, and with that power comes great responsibility and all these
Yeah.
wide details, right?
Yeah.
So, let's talk about buying the book. Again, if you've
Okay.
already purchased your copy, put me in the chat below. I see Jennifer is sharing on the back end via chat that we have a couple of congratulatory wishes. So thank you for those who are celebrating Melissa's book launch with us. Um,
Yes.
so I believe there's a discount this week for the Smart Talk series or the Smart Talk book rather.
Yeah.
Where can people find it and how much is it?
Yes. Okay. So here's the deal. For this week only, like only y'all, it's not going to get any cheaper than this or over this. You can get, there's 3 formats right now. There is the ebook, which is only 99 cents. So less than $1 on Amazon. So go to Amazon and we have our links everywhere. And I'm sure we're getting real noisy this week because 99 cents is like the most accessible it can be for anybody. So if you're sure, not even sure, like, for $1, there's something in there that's going to make you laugh or teach you something, right? But that also means that for like a pro or even a high school student, like I'm having my daughter read this because I'm like, God forbid something happens to me, but at least you know how to work in the field if you need to, right? But it's really, I think it's helpful. And so 99 cents through the end of the week, like get your copy. Please leave a good review on Amazon and all the algorithm stuff. We all know about that stuff. But for it to be found, they say we need some reviews about the book. So that would be awesome if anyone can support that way. We also have paperback, which is what I'm carrying here. I'm still waiting for my hardback. I think they get here today, so that'll be exciting. And I won't have the boo-boo in it, so I'll be totally excited. Sophie, so I'm like, yay. So there will be that nice hardcover with the dust cover as well. So the prices range this week from 99 cents all the way to like $28.99. And then if you're local in San Antonio, I do have copies. And we will be going, Julie and I, and my awesome spouse, James, will be going to the Public Relations Society of America International Conference. And I'll be speaking to students on November 12th and then the pros at their tract on November 14th. So we will have autographed copies there. So if you're local in San Antonio, you can get your hands on an autographed copy of the paperback or hardcover. And I'll also have those kind of books at conference and pretty much wherever I'm able to speak and kind of spread the good word.
Well, I want to share a quick congratulations. Sophie May just dropped a detail in the chat. It says that you're already #3 in public relations on Amazon. So we hope you're going to be a bestseller. Go ahead and buy those books now, y'all. So the final question that I have for you, Melissa, and you touched on it a little bit, but if there's anything you want to add to it, go ahead. How can the PR community help you this week? Of course, buying the book, sharing the word, but is there anything else that they can do to support you?
Yeah, I want to be honest in that this is super vulnerable, in PR, we're usually used to getting our clients, our organizations in front. I'm trying to pretend I'm the client or the book's the client, to be honest, right? And give it the love and service it deserves, but more because it's mission led, more because I want to really help all kinds of pros understand, like, you're a fit for PR, whether or not you had a formal training, because I didn't, whether or not you knew somebody who worked in the field, because I didn't, right? All the I didn'ts, like, I want to get over those humps. And so I would just love it if people could share, especially since it's 99 cents, like any post you'd see off MVW Communication, if they're willing to buy one and give it to a student that they know who's either in college or, like I said, even in high school, or if there's a journalist who's thinking about transitioning, or even journalists, as they have those inner conversations with their friends, like we do, like, consider, hey, have you heard about this book? I think spreading the word, because it's quite bold and scary at the same time to be in this space. But I own that if I can do that for others and encourage and invite others in, like, I feel like I should. So I'm just hoping we'll kind of rally around the book, not because it makes me money, right? Because books don't really do that in the way people think. It's because it spreads an attainable message and encouragement for people to try and succeed and feel empowered when they're doing this work, because it can be so much more than what people think it is from the outside.
I love when you described your book as almost a love letter for people to come and join you at this PR table. I thought that was very sound and spot on. I want to share a couple of additional comments that we got in the Q&A section. Christy Aylett says, ooh, I want a signed one at Icon. I'll be there, Christy. Come find me. Kathy Hill says she just bought her hard copy. Congratulations, Melissa. Well done.
Kathy Hill was one of my first bosses that helped me get my start. So love you, Kathy. And thanks to Lisa. And thanks for, giving me a shot. I talked about in the book how I started a full-time job right after college at a very quiet, lonely nonprofit. I was literally by myself in a building, but I needed a job. And so I always encourage people studying communication, like just get a job to sustain you and then work towards where you want to go if that's what needs to happen. But I did freelance on top of that job with Kathy and Lisa at In-House Public Relations at the time. And they really gave me that encouragement to get involved with trade associations, learn about Associated Press style writing, which is totally in the book. Cause I was like, what writing? Who? I write in like whatever my college told me to write in, right? So a lot of those unknowns, again, like we need someone to intervene and guide us. We don't all have a mentor. So I hope the book will be that mentor for all kinds of pros to keep going, try, or level up.
I see one more comment trickling in. It looks like Raul Vela Jr. on Facebook says, hi, congratulations, sister. We've got James Williamson saying congratulations as well. It sounds like this is such a moment of pride for your family. So I'm so excited for you.
Yes, thank you. They were all supportive. And then I think also like relief, like, oh my gosh, finally we're like here. I'll show you one last funny thing and then we can end out. So when you work with Scribe, they give you this, and I'm sure Sophie loves this, right? Like they give you this infographic map that's like, here's what the author's journey is like, right? And it literally has these ups and downs and like you're on a high and then you're in a low, right? And so that's literally what it's like. And so at the very end, it's like, take me home. And she's jumping for joy. And this is part of my embracing that. So I want to thank everyone for watching. Julia, I want to thank you for jumping in at the last minute and being courageous about it. And Jennifer for supporting all this. And let's just keep pushing it forward, like PR for good. Like, let's help people join our club and do well in it.
Awesome. Thank you all so much for joining us today. I had a blast talking with you, Melissa. Congratulations on the release of your book, Smart Talk, Public Relations Essentials All Pros Should Know. Buy your copy now on Amazon. You can buy the ebook, 99 cents, the paperback, or the hardcover. And we want to get you to that bestseller list. So buy your copies, y'all. Thank you for joining us. Have a great day.
See you next time. Bye-bye.